Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 10, Kreacher's Tale. Jen is back with us.
Hey guys.
And we have a loaded chapter for you. Obviously, this chapter involves Kreacher himself. But I know, Jen, we were talking in the lead up to doing this. You really, really enjoyed this chapter.
I did. I like this chapter a lot. I like the additional details that we get. I like hearing from Kreacher. I like the fact that it humanizes Kreacher a little bit more.
Yeah, we get a lot more in-depth. We get a lot of Slytherin talk, too.
Yes. I'm in favor of anything that humanizes Slytherins.
Fair enough.
But we do see a lot of that. I think that's why books 6 and 7 I like more than the beginning. It gets so much more nuanced.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And we will learn about a specific Slytherin in this chapter. And it's kind of a big reveal. So we'll keep that to the side for right now. We start the chapter with Harry waking up to find Hermione and Ron asleep. Seemingly, they fell asleep holding hands. And it gives Harry a feeling of strange loneliness.
It's so cute.
The strange loneliness is cute?
No.
Interesting. Jen finds strange loneliness cute. I get it. This is maybe one of the first times he feels like a complete third wheel. Because I don't think he ever felt that when he was hanging around Lavender and Ron. He just felt annoyed just in general. But here, I think he gets that third wheel feeling where he's like, oh, they're together. They're sharing something. And I'm just existing over here.
Yep.
Okay. Which,
poor Harry.
To be fair, he already has that kind of tone in his own head because he's taking on the burden of, like, because of the prophecy, I have to bear all this weight, ultimately. So he kind of has that I must trudge through this alone mentality. So this just kind of, he wakes up to a punch in the face, essentially, of just like, oof.
Yeah.
All right, I'm reminded of this yet again. Awesome. His thoughts then dwell on Albus, particularly the negative bits. Primarily, did Albus even care for him at all, or was he just a tool to be used by Dumbledore? And, you know, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before with Molly about how, isn't it interesting how Harry is focusing so much? Because we've started this book with Alpheus giving the glowing, perfect portrait of who Albus Dumbledore was. And then Rita opens up the idea that, oh, maybe he's not picture perfect. And then Auntie Muriel doubling down on that, being like, no, he was actually pretty bad. And you get this conflicting good versus bad view of Albus Dumbledore. And Harry has seemingly thrown all of the good bits away and is now just solely focused on these negative aspects of who Albus Dumbledore might have even been, because he hasn't gotten clear answers as to any of it.
No.
So it's very unclear. But the unclear bits to him are proving a little bit more potent.
Yes. I do feel bad for him, especially the, like, feeling alone. I think that's really unfortunate. But I get where he's coming from, so he's lost Dumbledore, he can't talk to him anymore. You want to, you know, remember, he's always looked up to Dumbledore, he wants to remember the good in Dumbledore, and then he starts to hear conflicting things, and he doesn't really have a way of finding out if they're true or not. So it's really easy to let things like that get stuck in your head. So I do have a decent amount of empathy for him, because he seems to be kind of ruminating on those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It's understandable that he'd want a solution.
Harry ends up wandering the house by himself, and he notices as he enters his old room with Ron, for example, that somebody has already been through the house. He thinks about Snape, obviously, because that's the original concern. But then his thoughts shift to Mundungus, because most of the drawers seem to be haphazardly opened and thus rifled through. So he thinks, maybe Mundungus came here and pillaged the place, which tracks because we know he's done it before.
Yep.
He also notices that the portrait of Phineas Nigellus is blank. It is a blank portrait, so he assumes he spent the evening in the headmaster's office. He eventually lands in Sirius's room, which Harry notes it's the first time he's ever been in this room. What does the room look like? It's covered in posters and pictures. Pretty much no excess wallpaper available. It's pretty much all covered up. There's some Gryffindor banners, some Muggle motorcycles, pictures of Muggle girls, which Harry notes they're Muggles because they don't move in the photograph, which that's an astute observation. Obviously, he picks this up as Sirius being very anti-everything his family. I mean, literally everything that I just read. The banner, the Gryffindor, the Muggle motorcycles, and the girls were all things that his family would not like, appreciate, or want adorning their home.
Yeah.
And yet, here Sirius has draped his entire room with it and put the permanent sticking charms on them so that they can never be removed. However, there's got to be a downside to that. What if you put up a poster of like your favorite Quidditch team or your favorite wizarding band, and then all of a sudden something happens and you're like, oh, I don't really want that up there. Oh, now it's stuck on there forever. Permanent sticking charm, maybe not one of the charms that we should put on our everyday spells.
Is it something that, like, the caster can undo?
I don't know. Do only they know the counter charm?
That was kind of
But that also undoes the permanent part of permanent sticking charm.
Okay, new solution. Just permanent stick something on top. The wall is just many layers deep.
Oh, I got you. Okay, so that would be a solution.
We're going to solve a bad decision with another bad decision.
Touché. I just really hope you don't go through a lot of phases through life, and then your living space is much more condensed. But anyway, there is a really nice picture of the Marauders. Actually, sorry, I don't mean to make this a negative quip, because it is really a nice picture, and Harry does identify with seeing his dad and Lupin and Sirius, obviously, and his dad wearing glasses and such and such. It's a nice moment. However, this is a prime example. Do you think Sirius went back to this room at Grimmauld Place, looked at this, and was like, Peter Pettigrew is now permanently on my bedroom wall, and I have to stare at him forever?
I'm surprised that he didn't get, like, a Sharpie and, like, scratch out his face.
Or, like, burn it out or something. I don't know. Maybe there is some latent, remember who he was, not who he is.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of.
I admire people who can do that. I struggle with that.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. Harry eventually comes across a letter that was written to Sirius from one Lily Potter. And it's about a Christmas present that Sirius recently gave to a 1-year-old Harry Potter, which was a toy broomstick.
Aww.
And essentially the broomstick hovers about 2 feet off the ground, which for a 1-year-old, that's dangerous, yeah?
That's pretty high.
That's pretty high. Yeah, you should watch this kid. Which they do. Lily does say they watch him very closely when he jumps on the toy broomstick.
This is so much more of a question for Molly or Julie.
Great point. We'll post it to the mothers of the podcast. Yeah. Would you let your 1-year-old child ride a toy broomstick 2 feet off the ground? It does say that he almost killed the cat, which, okay, they have a cat.
First of all, interesting they have a cat. Second of all, how did he almost kill the cat?
I am interpreting it as the cat was sleeping peacefully in a sunspot on the floor, and then this child comes zooming out of nowhere and nearly gave the cat a heart attack. And it did the hair stand on end, hop 3 feet into the air, scared moment. I'm assuming that's what it was. I hope.
I hope so, too.
I hope that was it.
Poor cat.
The poor cat. He also, 1-year-old Harry, destroyed the Christmas gift that Petunia got Lily, which was, in Lily's words, a pretty nasty-looking vase.
I was surprised. So when I was rereading this, I thought James was writing it at first.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, okay, Petunia getting him an ugly vase. I can see that. I was a little bit surprised to see Lily throwing shade at Petunia.
I think she's throwing shade at the gift. So when I read this, my thoughts were, oh, they have a relationship.
Yeah.
The fact that they're sending Christmas gifts, and granted, it's not the most wonderful, designs on a vase or whatever. It's not the most beautiful vase. That's a matter of perspective. That's fairly subjective.
It is nice that
they send an actual thing. Like, not what they've been sending Harry for the last several Christmases, which is like a sock or, whatever. This was an actual gift. So they have to have some sort of actual relationship. And I would love to delve more into that. Is it just Petunia and Lily? Or is Petunia sending, like, the family the gift? Or, like, how does that work? Like, clearly there's a connection there still.
Yeah. Is
what I gleaned from it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That there would even be an actual gift. But
no, I mean, I think that's a good point. Like, yeah. They are still talking.
I just caught that as a really interesting little side nugget in the letter. This is where we obviously know that it is not James writing this, because as full of himself as James might be, I don't think he'd ever write about himself in the third person. So we get the note that James thinks he'll be great at Quidditch,
yeah,
referring to Harry again, which I could only imagine Harry reading this. That has to hit a certain way.
Oh, God, I'd be bawling.
It also, the letter goes on to say that Bathilda Bagshot has been doting on Harry fairly often. So Harry's getting some love from another famous individual living in Godric's Hollow.
That's cute.
Yeah, that's really nice. I get that vibe of, like, old babysitter / like old aunt that just comes by, like, maybe gives some treats or like some whatever. But yeah, it's a nice little comment. James, we get the note that he's frustrated at being shut in their house, and that Albus has taken his invisibility cloak away from him. So there's a lot to glean from this letter. Obviously, we've picked apart a couple of things already early on. The idea that James is being shut in and he's frustrated, I think, parallels two things. It parallels Sirius and the frustration that he had being shut in Grimmauld Place.
Yes.
Knowing that you're capable of helping and being told you can't.
Yeah.
It's got to be hard. And then I think it also parallels Harry in a lot of ways. Like the summer that he was left, multiple summers, where he was left at the Dursleys and didn't get many letters for whatever reason, whether it was Dobby stealing them or literally they couldn't communicate with him safely, so they just didn't until they came.
Yeah.
And then Harry's frustration and anger at being like, I'm locked away, I'm away from everybody, I'm away from everybody I love that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And I'm not being told anything. It's not a great place to be.
No.
So I think when Harry reads that, he's feeling a lot of connection to his father, being like, oh, I understand that feeling. I know what he was feeling at that time, and that's terrible. And then the invisibility cloak drop and Harry questions him himself. It's like, well, why does Albus take that from him to begin with?
Yeah.
He's said on many of occasions he doesn't need an invisibility cloak. He's good enough magically to be invisible without it.
Yeah.
So is there a lesser member of the Order that might need it, or what have you?
It's a really good question.
So then we get to a visit from a member of the Marauders. Wormy has come to visit. Wormy. I wonder how he feels about that nickname.
I think that was part of why he ended up where he was.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Wormy came to visit, and he was looking down. He was looking very saddened and not very happy. And Lily assumes it was because of the recent news of the McKinnon's death. And she herself was very upset about it and cried all evening. So she assumes the McKinnons were the reason that Wormtail was looking a little worse for wear. I'm going to take a little stab and say that it was for another reason. Which, if you're Wormtail, why do you even go visit at that point? You're just torturing yourself.
It had to... Yeah, I don't know. I think just guilt.
Maybe.
Trying to convince himself that it was the right decision.
I don't know. I'd be like, why would I want to go see friends that I'm at least... Maybe he hasn't given them up at this point, but he's at least
really
getting
considering,
there.
Yeah.
He's getting to that point at the best.
Yeah.
That's best case scenario. Yeah. Lily goes on to say that Bathilda has been telling some crazy stories about Albus that she doesn't know that Albus would be too pleased about, which feeds into Harry's fear of, like, Albus might not be the guy that he thought he was. However, the letter gets cut off. You wouldn't believe... And cut off. And we don't get to hear what particularly that little tidbit of information was. And Harry reflects on the letter with a feeling of... I want to use this word because he uses the word eruption of joy and grief. What a visceral word eruption is.
That is a powerful descriptor.
Yeah, of joy and grief. It's a couple of things. It's obviously... there is a picture accompanying it of him zooming around on the toy broomstick, so that's nostalgic.
Yeah.
It's knowing that Sirius gave him a Christmas present that so hits on who he is as a person. It's obviously a lot of the information that Lily is contained in here. It's also the fact that her G's, specifically, the letter G, was written in the same way that Harry writes his, and he fixates on this.
That's such a cute detail.
It's a cute detail that he picks up on it, and then he searches for every single letter G in the letter.
Yeah.
Which is such a human thing to do. Mm-hmm. As Harry is having this incredibly emotional moment with himself in his godfather's room,
yeah,
Hermione and Ron absolutely full-on panic when he is not sleeping in a sleeping bag next to them as they wake up.
Okay, to be fair, yeah.
Valid. It's valid. Especially when he's already expressed concern like 2 or 3 times over the last several days about piecing out and going on his own.
Maybe we should just split up.
Yeah. Harry ends up tucking the letter and the photograph into his pouch, the pouch that Hagrid got him. And Harry pitches the idea of going to speak with Bathilda at Godric's Hollow, which Hermione sees coming from a mile away and is like, okay. But this is where Hermione, and I want your 2 cents on this, Jen. Harry is obviously having a moment.
Yeah.
He's obviously having an emotional moment, which no one...
would begrudge him.
Yeah, no one would begrudge him that. And Hermione is so good, I think, at one, avoiding conflict, but 2, avoiding conflict with Harry specifically, and says the words, quote, "Of course, I can see why that's upset you," end quote. When he says, he wants to know more about Bathilda and what she has to say about Albus and such and such. Mm-hmm. What are your 2 cents on Hermione's way of kind of disengaging the potential for a blow-up? Like, she's kind of going into preservation mode of, like, let's calm this down. Everybody take it down a notch.
So there's, like, 5 or 6 different levels of empathy that you can show someone. And it's ranked from, like, how relatable it is to, like, if you can see why that would be problematic, or if you can, like, put yourself in someone else's position and understand the more complexities of things. So this is actually fairly high on the list of how she's able to, like she is empathizing with him in this moment. She is saying, like, I can completely understand why they would be difficult. And I think being able to empathize with someone and understand where they're coming from does inherently disengage, like, disarm.
It diffuses
them.
the situation, yeah.
So I think it's good on a couple different levels, because it really underscores, like, she's a very empathetic person. She and Harry are good friends. She knows him very well. She can see why that would be something that he would react strongly to. And then also, by being able to express that to him, it doesn't make it feel then to Harry like her rejecting his idea is her rejecting how he feels. So it's very emotionally intelligent of Hermione to handle it that way.
I thought so too. And Harry does react a little testily to it, but maybe not as aggressive as he may have.
I think that's really the key, is that I think in past books he would have blown up. And I think here he was just kind of cranky.
Do you think that's... I mean, obviously, I agree with your point about the emotional intelligence of Hermione. I think it's stellar. But do you also think that it's also emotional maturity from Harry on a level? Because he has blown up at them in the past. He has aged and generally been more mature in other aspects of his life.
I'll give him a little bit of credit here.
I'll take it.
Not all of the credit, but a little bit of the credit.
Fair enough. They eventually decide to leave Sirius's room. Hermione follows Ron down the stairs, and Harry's slowly following after, and then all of a sudden he comes upon a door that has this interesting phrasing on the nameplate, or however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
And the nameplate says, "Do not enter without the express permission of Regulus Arcturus Black." I don't know how you feel about this. For me, there's two conflicting emotions here.
Okay.
One, I love how Harry responds to this. I love it. Mm-hmm. He's so calm and he's so chill about it. He's like, "Hey, Hermione, could you come here for a second?" I love just the chillness that he's about to deliver this bombshell discovery.
Yeah.
But the conflicting emotion is the randomness of this just being a random nameplate that he just happens to look at. Not some special moment, not some like eureka like discovery, not any like hard work that they actually put in. They just happen to randomly walk past.
And that bothers you?
Jen, you have to take in, this was the obsession with the Harry Potter fandom between book 6 and book 7.
Okay.
There were theories, there were all kinds of comment sections and
online discussion boards.
Discussion boards, yes. That were dedicated to RAB.
Okay.
Who is RAB? And there was so much hype surrounding who RAB could be. And he happens to just walk past the nameplate and is like, "Oh, huh, okay."
Okay, that's even funnier. That's amazing.
It's like a conflicting thing because it's like, it's awesome.
Yep.
But also, it's so not awesome.
Yeah.
That it's just like...
It's so mundane.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's funny.
You know what I mean?
I didn't think of it in that context at all. But I completely... Yeah, like you think it's going to be this central mystery to the 7th book.
This
and it's
drove so many theories between the two books.
Oh, that's so funny.
And then to just have it be like some... It's not throwaway, but it's almost throwaway.
It's kind of throwaway.
Where it's just like, oh, hey, isn't that something?
It's a sign on a door.
That's interesting.
I'm honestly more impressed that he was able to pick that up. I mean, whereas like maybe RAB was like really, really big. Like lettering.
Ornamental.
Yeah, because if you're just looking at a typeface of someone's name, I'm not picking up that their initials are RAB.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting that he's obviously hyper-focused on RAB. Who is RAB? Who is this person?
Yeah.
So maybe seeing the initials maybe highlighted, not necessarily literally highlighted, but like ornamentally set up in a way, or just bolded, or in capitalized so it pops. Some
kind of...
that clicked in him. And... we will say they have had conversations about Regulus Black in the past. Like, him and Sirius have talked about Regulus. The idea, like I said, of people like pouring through the books to find out any hint that they could about this book in general, book 7, but specifically who RAB might be, it has been there. Regulus Black, maybe not the Arcturus part, but if there's Regulus Black, you can maybe hypothesize that there might be an A middle name somewhere in there.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying. I think it's funny because it is kind of like it feels like there are a couple moments like this where they, like, things just happen, right? Like, it's not a deeper mystery. And it does kind of make it feel a little bit more like, sometimes it is just the random mundane moments. They're like things. You see something and it clicks. But,
well, regardless, RAB has been found. He has been discovered. Sirius's brother. And Harry details that discussion that he had with Sirius about Regulus being a Death Eater who then became disenchanted with the whole notion. They get into Regulus's room, which also, side note, this is kind of odd. It's locked. But it also seems to have been ransacked. Drawers were open, things were askew. So did someone ransack it and then lock the door?
that would be a little bit odd.
Wouldn't it? Like, and get me, tell me if I'm wrong, but it did have the ransacked vibe to it.
I thought that it did, but is it possible it was ransacked by someone different?
Maybe. Or maybe it was just, but let's say you're Mundungus. Mm-hmm. Why would you skip Regulus's room?
That is odd. That's an interesting point.
Right?
I missed that detail completely.
I'm like, why would this one be locked, and why would Mundungus skip it?
Yeah.
And furthermore, if he didn't skip it and did ransack it, why would he then lock it? It's just weird to me. I don't know.
I like the idea of, like, Mundungus running around without his wand, just stealing stuff. He's like, well, can't do that room.
Yeah. You're like, well. I guess I'll pass over the clearly Slytherin member of this family that might actually have some value in there, and whatever. So we get into the room. There are Slytherin colors everywhere. It's directly opposed to Sirius's room. And even more so, the black family crest and motto is painted over the bed. And if you want to try to take a shot at pronouncing the black family motto, by all means, because I do not speak French and I don't want to butcher it.
Toujours pour.
Yep, that's it.
Always pure.
Mm-hmm. Newspaper clippings stuck together to make a ragged collage. And clearly, this line of detail disappointed me the most in this entire book, because it makes me realize that Molly and I have been wrong from the beginning. Lucius is not the collage person of the Death Eaters. It has always been Regulus. Regulus is the collager. Maybe Lucius has got to stick to maybe the trifold cardboard boards that you use for grade school projects.
Would he be into scrapbooking?
Scrapbooking, possibly. Maybe he just is into the tech and maybe just does a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe he has some Excel sheets. I don't know how he does this thing, but it's clearly we were wrong. We were wrong. Not collages. That was Regulus. Apologies to all of the Lucius fans that were hating on us this entire time. He doesn't do collages. That was Regulus. Our bad.
Look, we're all learning things.
We're all learning things.
Podcast.
Hey, we haven't read this book in a minute. We're learning some details. It's fine. We forgot that. I'm kidding. I'm assuming it's just a bunch of newspaper clippings that just stuck together randomly on his floor after years and years and years of being just there. There's a photo of the Slytherin Quidditch team, and Regulus was front and center, which indicates that he was the Seeker, because that's where the Seeker usually takes.
This has my favorite line of the chapter. Harry he decides to stop talking because he realizes no one's listening. Like, that's a mood.
Yeah, that is a mood. I think we've all been there. Yeah, he finds it very, very interesting.
Yep.
And just Hermione and Ron do not care. You think Ron would care?
That was what I was surprised at. I was fully expecting, like, Hermione's not paying attention, but wouldn't Ron be?
I think Ron is preoccupied with the idea that at any moment in time there could either be a booby trap or specifically a spider that can jump out at him and distract him.
That's fair. I actually had a slightly different thought from that, and I'd like to get your take on it. Do you think that Ron... Is this where we're going to start maybe seeing Ron try to be more mature?
Well, I think we've...
In the sense of, I feel like maybe he's holding back a little just to impress certain people.
I think I think in this book you've started to see him take some steps with the wonderful book that he was given by his brothers, which then he gifted a copy to Harry about how to make girls like you, essentially.
I love that he gifted a copy to Harry.
That's a true wingman right there. Even though the first time it's a little odd, and I don't think we mentioned this, he like compliments Mrs. Weasley on something, and then Ron, like from a corner, like around a corner, is just like thumbs up. Like, why are you approving of someone complimenting your mom in that way when you know it's where it's from? Like, I don't know. It was just weird. The whole thing was weird. But anyway.
Ron clearly doesn't have a problem with him dating Ginny, so...
Well, he does and he doesn't. Which is he's very conflicted about it.
That was the main... So there were two thoughts I had when Ron gifted Harry that book. The first one was, that's kind of an awkward thing to imply that you need help from a book for. But, like, okay, maybe he's just being a bro. But the second thing is like, hey, here's a book to get women to like you. Also, you're, like, into my sister.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which, again, like...
I'm thinking Ron is hopeful that Harry will use this to move on from Ginny.
That's kind of what I was assuming.
Until he finds them kissing in Ginny's room and is not too pleased about it. Yeah, so we do find out that Regulus was the seeker of the Slytherin Quidditch team while he was at Hogwarts. And they talk about the idea of like, okay, RAB. If this is RAB, the locket could be somewhere in this room. Could be somewhere in the house, but let's check the room first. Nothing comes up. And they get really discouraged. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe we threw it out, maybe something happened. Then Hermione remembers, oh, wait, there was a locket. I remember a locket. We threw it out. Do you remember we each tried to open it, and we couldn't, and we threw it out? And then Harry's like, wait a second. I do remember that. How much you want to bet Kreacher stole it? And they're like, ooh, okay. So they all run down the stairs, lighting opening the curtain that's covering the matriarch of this house to shrieks and racial slurs, as one does.
Yeah.
And,
every house has one of those.
Everyone. So they find Kreacher's little hiding spot, and sadly, nothing is there. Nothing of value is there, I should say. So Harry's like, I am not giving up on this. I refuse to just let this be. So he reaches back and in his most demanding voice ever, I imagine, he yells for Kreacher. After he yells for Kreacher, Kreacher does appear, dutifully. And there is this quote that Harry says in describing Kreacher. He thinks Kreacher, even without knowing him so much, he's like, he would have found Kreacher a distinctly unlovable object, even if the elf had not betrayed Sirius.
Those are harsh words.
On a couple of different levels.
Yeah.
Distinctly unlovable. That's harsh.
That's harsh.
Could you imagine anyone describing you as distinctly unlovable? That would hurt real deep.
That's the kind of insult you never quite get over.
But then he goes one further by qualifying that as object.
Yeah.
Not even a creature, as an object.
It's not Harry's best thought.
Not his best moment.
No.
Maybe one of his worst, if we're being, real about it. Like, this might be his worst thought that he has.
Yeah.
And he's had some thoughts.
Yeah, he's had some thoughts.
But this is bad. So... Anyway, Kreacher had, in fact, stolen the locket out of the garbage when they threw it away. However, so hope up at this point, before Kreacher just completely tanks all of the hope by saying that Mundungus, in his rummaging through the house, found the locket, stole the locket.
Great.
So, now this starts off Kreacher's tale. Harry still has not given up on this. And he's like, Kreacher, you need to tell me literally everything you know about the locket, about Regulus. Tell me everything. And now we get Kreacher's tale. We learn that Regulus joined the Death Eaters at the age of 16. Young.
That is so young.
That is crazy young. We learned that he was pretty much a Voldy fanatic from the get. He was very enthusiastic about Voldy's idea of establishing wizard-kind's dominance over muggles. He was very pro this ideology and was very much happy to be in his service at the age of 16. A year after this, Voldy asks his Death Eaters for a house elf.
Yeah.
And Regulus volunteers Kreacher to be this house elf. It's a great honor. We are so honored to be able to help Voldy out in his quest of whatever it is he's doing.
Yeah. So far, makes sense.
Yep. So he qualifies it with, do whatever the Dark Lord asks, but come back home. Do whatever the Dark Lord asks and come back home.
I think that's actually pretty sweet.
Because Regulus actually likes Kreacher.
Yeah, like they actually get along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
It's cute to see the bond.
Yeah.
Because you don't typically see that with house elves.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder at this point, does he have any idea of what Voldy is using this house elf for?
I would imagine no.
Yeah, I can't imagine either. So I don't know that the come home part is like, hey, if this goes sideways, make sure you come home after this. Or just genuinely, I like having you here, come home.
I'm gonna headcanon it as just, they're buds.
I'll agree with that. I'll take that same headcanon. We get Voldy taking Kreacher to the cave by the sea, which is where he placed the locket, the Horcrux. And I like how Harry's like, I can visually put myself there. Like, I know exactly where he's going. I know exactly how he's doing this. I'm feeling this. I'm not listening to this,
Yeah.
you know?
He's playing it out in his mind.
Mm-hmm. And Stunner, Voldy made Kreacher drink the potion. I don't think anybody was shocked by that detail.
No.
But Voldy then left Kreacher there after placing the Horcrux in the vacant basin and then refilling the potion on top of it. Voldy left Kreacher there, and Kreacher then did drink the water of the lake, got attacked, and remembered that his master said to return home, so returned home. Which I'm sure, Hermione is quite emotional at this whole story because, one, it's awful abuse.
Yeah.
Two, he left him to die. Not only abused him, but then left him to die. Intended him to die.
Yes.
And then just the idea that Regulus was actually good to Kreacher and essentially saved Kreacher's life,
Yeah.
really. I'm sure it's got her all kinds of feeling the feels. So, but then Ron notes, because Harry's like, I can't wrap my head around how you got out of here. Because you can't apparate or disapparate. I mean, otherwise Dumbledore would have been able to just, boom, there.
Right.
And of all people, Ron chips in with, well, we know that elf magic isn't like wizard magic. It's different.
Yeah.
It's a different magic set. So it can make sense. And I think that's another, I don't know if Hermione was still in an emotional state at this point, or if she was like, wow, like genuine surprise. Great comment from Ron, though.
I also like that when Harry is asking him, well, how did you come back? He's like, he told me to come back. And
Yeah,
Harry's like,
like-
no, but how? And Kreacher's like, he told me to. Like, I love the,
I don't get what
Kreacher's
you're-
just, yeah.
What are you missing here? I'm
Right.
telling you the answer.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great moment. Regulus becomes worried when Kreacher reported what exactly happened. So, now this is where the timeline gets a little sketchy. Because it says, quote, a little while later. Well, what's a little while later? That's very vague.
Yeah.
So, could this have happened shortly after the year? Are we talking like a year? Are we talking a year and a half? Are we talking years plural? We don't know.
Yeah.
So we don't know when Regulus, in his servitude of Voldy, decided like, hey, I'm done.
Yeah. This isn't for me.
Yeah, we don't have that specific timeline, at least listed here. But Kreacher took Regulus to the cave where all this happened. Regulus ends up drinking the potion. Everybody assumed. Hermione assumed. Harry assumed. He was like, oh my god, this is disgusting. Regulus made you drink this potion. And Kreacher's like, no, he drank it.
That is heartbreaking.
That's rough.
Yeah. But
That is
that's
really-
also, like, major props to him for clearly how much he cared about Kreacher.
Yes, cared for Kreacher and knew that Kreacher had already gone through it once, and probably no one should have to go through that twice in a lifetime.
Yeah.
So he decides to drink the potion, tells Kreacher to leave, tell no one, and destroy the locket no matter what. And Regulus then was dragged into the lake and becomes one of the Inferi, or at least one of the bodies in the lake. Kreacher tried to destroy it. Couldn't do it. No matter what spell he tried, no matter what magic he put on this locket, he assumed to destroy it, he needed to open it. Couldn't find a way to open it. Hermione, again, emotional at all of this house elf abuse and also love.
Mm-hmm. She's an empathetic person. Explains Kreacher in general and how it pays to be nice to house elves, because you got to remember that all of Kreacher's loyalty is probably to Regulus and maybe to their parents if they were as kind. Yeah.
But when he left the house, when Sirius told him to get out, I can't imagine Bellatrix was nice. I'm sorry. I know they mentioned Bellatrix and Narcissa were probably kind to Kreacher. No, I refuse that.
Really?
Narcissa was probably kind.
I would imagine that Bellatrix would be kind as long as you obeyed what she wanted.
I don't get that sense at all.
Really? Not even before Azkaban? Because she's definitely unhinged post-Azkaban. You don't think that she was a little bit more tactful and manipulative before she went to Azkaban?
Maybe, although she did torture someone into his sanity to go to Azkaban.
Yeah.
So she was a little unhinged.
Fair. All right, I'll give you that.
I just don't, me personally, I know they say the two were nice to him. I'll believe Bellatrix was nice to a house elf when I actually see the words in print.
See, I feel like it would be something where, like, if Narcissa was nice to it, I'm not saying that they were benevolently nice to house elves, more like strategically.
I still say that's stretching Bellatrix.
Really?
Not Narcissa. If you tell me Narcissa, I'd be fine.
Okay.
Bellatrix, I'm like, prove it.
No, I mean, that's fair.
I would tell Hermione, prove that. And good luck trying to prove it. That's just me. But that they were kind to him, so they gave him the information. And think about it. Sirius was never kind to Kreacher. Always hated Kreacher. He had his reasons. To him, Kreacher embodied everything he hated about his family.
Yeah.
I understand that. However, there's consequences to every action. And this one happened to ultimately cost Sirius's life. But that's not how Kreacher thinks of it. Kreacher thinks of it as, well, I'm just doing my best for the people who I feel loyal to and will love me and give me positive attention, and I will do the same for them.
Yeah.
So she's trying to kind of like spin it from Kreacher's point of view, because again, Harry's struggling to wrap his head around, well, if you loved the Blacks so much, why did you just throw Sirius under the bus?
Harry's looking at it from a pragmatic standpoint. Hermione's looking at it from an emotional.
Right.
Which is pretty in line with their characters.
Yep. Ultimately, Harry asks Kreacher to find and bring Mundungus to Grimmauld Place in order to finish Master Regulus's work. And Harry does kick in the shrewdness here. If there was a part of his Slytherin nature that kicked in, the shrewd and cunning aspect to which he manipulated Kreacher here is pretty on point.
Do we think that he's doing it with the intent to manipulate Kreacher, or do we think that he's doing it with the intent of, like, okay, I'm gonna actually, like, treat you better because it's the right thing to do here? I
will give you both.
Okay.
But I will definitely give you that manipulation is not 0.
Okay. I'll take it. That's fair.
It's definitely present.
Yes.
Because he is trying to...
He is trying to benefit from it.
And he also knows that Kreacher is not exactly his best friend.
Right.
Nor is he Ron's, nor is he Hermione's.
Right.
So he's got to frame this in a way that will entice Kreacher to help him.
Yeah.
So if he can spin this in a way like, look, hey, we're trying to help Master Regulus. We're trying to help him out. We're trying to complete his goal that he died for. Help us. It's a shrewd move on his part.
Yeah, no, it is.
And I like how he starts it off, and he glances Hermione out of the corner of his eye, and he's like, I got this. Hold on. Let me cook. I got this. Yeah. But he then turns it up a notch by offering the fake locket to Kreacher, which then sends Kreacher into a full-on emotional breakdown, which takes them roughly a half hour to settle him down.
I think that's adorable.
It is. It shows you that, we've seen the side of Kreacher that's so hard and angry and disgruntled and unpleasant.
Yep.
And here, I don't want to say human, because he's not human, but like the other sides to Kreacher, where he has more emotions than just indignant, you know? So it's a really good moment for Kreacher. Clearly, Harry said the right words, because Kreacher then bows, full-on bows, to Harry and Ron, and then even spasms a little bit toward Hermione.
I love that description.
Which Harry's like, best we could have hoped for.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
I'll take it.
Baby steps in the right direction. I do have a question for you. First of all, I want to get your thoughts on everything in the Kreacher's tale.
Okay.
And then I have a question for you about Kreacher and the fake locket.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on Kreacher's tale as a whole?
I really like it because, again, we're getting more detail and more nuance into these characters. I think it really flushes out Regulus and Kreacher a whole lot, and for once it's something that's positive. I don't really think we know much about Regulus prior to this chapter, so it is kind of always painted as like Sirius was the one to reject the family, and Regulus joined in with the Death Eaters, but then I think Sirius describes it as he had heard that Regulus got cold feet and tried to get out and then was killed, so it kind of paints Regulus a little bit more as a coward. So I really like that this kind of dispels that, and this is such a good Slytherin redemption arc. This is the kind of Slytherin redemption arc that I crave so badly from these stories. But so it is nice in a very
This is literally what you were talking about last chapter in the last episode, of taking a Slytherin, not who is always good.
Nope.
But who's someone who did turn bad.
Yes.
And seems to have come around.
Yes, and comes out the other side. Mm-hmm. And I love how they portray this with, not only is Regulus smart enough to be able to understand what is going on with it, but also he realizes how terrible it is. And I love that he drinks the potion instead of making Kreacher drink it. That is the ultimate cherry on top of this redemption story, because he is actually treating Kreacher as a living, breathing thing and not a disposable object to... So, like, the contrast between how Regulus handles the situation and how Voldemort handles it is so stark in this, and I love it so dearly.
I think one of these days, one of us, maybe even you, if this is hitting you in such a way, should do a real deep dive on Regulus and the Black family. I do have a question for you before we go to the spoiler section.
Yes.
The locket. Harry gives Kreacher the fake locket.
I think I know what you're going to ask, and I was wondering that too.
Does the locket count as clothing?
Apparently not.
Apparently not
but
is the correct answer.
Right, but,
yeah.
But I had the same thought reading this of, he's got to be really careful.
That's a dangerous game.
That's a very dangerous game to play. I feel like that's such a gray area. You can wear it. I know it's not clothing.
It's an accessory.
But it's an accessory, and that feels right adjacent to, like...
I feel like if Kreacher wanted to... He could spin the gray area to be like, you're giving...
me a wearable item. I am no longer...
Yep.
Yeah. No,
I feel like if he wanted to, he can manipulate that situation to free himself.
Yes. It just feels really adjacent.
It's too close.
Yeah.
It's too close for comfort.
I'm rereading it, and I'm like, ooh, should he have done that?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Yep, I agree. I think that might be the poll for this episode. That'd be a good one. So on that note, we will pause here and we will head to the spoiler section. Like I said, give us your input. Let us know what you think about all these little debates and questions that we come up with here on the podcast. You can let us know by commenting on Twitter and Instagram, even leaving a comment on YouTube. You can find all of those at Hogwarts a Pod. You can leave a comment on Spotify if you're listening to this on Spotify. participate in those polls. I just mentioned what this probable poll will be for this episode. Let us know what your thought by clicking that option. So, all ways to engage with us. We'll shout you out on the podcast. Always fun to hear from you guys. But we will pause it here, and we will return with the spoiler section. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the...
designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your...
windshield wipers. eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying. Just beautiful.
Whatever you love, find it on eBay. eBay. Things people love.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, we are back with the spoiler section of Kreacher's Tale, and we are going to continue because we did some research in the break. And Jen, what'd you find?
Okay, so I have pulled up the Holy Grail of References, which is the Harry Potter subreddit.
Of course.
They've had this debate before. I'm looking at a post from 4 years ago where someone else has posed this question of, does a locket count as clothing? And it seems kind of maybe skewed towards that it doesn't, but there's a decent amount of people who do kind of agree that it's a gray area, because they're also bringing up things that I think are fairly valid points of Dobby was wearing a pillowcase. That's not traditionally clothing. Someone said that they don't consider jewelry clothing, but because clothing is meant to cover the body and a locket doesn't cover everything, but then the counter argument is, well, you wear clothing, you wear a locket, where's the differentiation? Kreacher is wearing an old tea towel as well for clothing, which isn't traditionally a piece of clothing. Someone else also mentioned that a hat they would consider as something that could be considered clothing, but not something like a piece of jewelry. So it seems like overall, this isn't as cut and dry as it could be, I guess. Like, this seems very adjacent. And then you also brought up in the break a good point that Hermione was
knitting mittens and socks, neither of which, but particularly mittens specifically, seems to be an essential piece of clothing.
Right,
so
it's an accessory.
It could be an accessory.
So where is the line then between, so you've got mittens and a hat that are derived from cloth but are technically accessories, but jewelry, because it's not cloth, wouldn't count as a piece of clothing? Like, is that how pedantic this definition is for them?
How about this? And this doesn't solve this is a real big gray area, and he's hoping or banking on Kreacher not thinking of it this way, but what if it's because Kreacher's not intending to wear the locket? Like, it's a valuable item of someone that Kreacher cared about that he's keeping as a treasure, not as clothing.
That's fair.
Is that what the differential, the line is? It's not intended to be worn. It's intended as a relic of sorts.
Maybe because it also belonged to his master. It has
to be given by the master. Maybe that's another technicality.
Feels like there's a lot of technicalities in this.
Yeah, there's too many, and it's a very big gray area.
Yeah, it is.
But there is one spoilery thing that I wanted to get to in this chapter, at least I had. And that's that Voldemort's name has been uttered multiple times aloud by characters in this chapter. And we obviously know from the last chapter, last time they said his name, 2 Death Eaters walked immediately into the diner that they were seated in. However, this time, no Death Eaters walked into Sirius's room, the kitchen, The Regulus's room, no Death Eaters present in any of those rooms, nor did they the entire chapter. So my question is, Grimmauld Place's enchantments must have then held to some degree to keep them from literally stepping on to Grimmauld Place's doorstep.
Yeah. So I think it's important to note that the taboo still did go off.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's why they're hanging out in the square in front. In the next chapter, Lupin comes in. They're talking to Lupin briefly, and Lupin says that they're posting Death Eaters outside of all of the places that they think that Harry could be to try to explain away why there are Death Eaters in front of Grimmauld Place. So the Order still has not figured out the taboo. So it's not just exclusive to
these three.
The trio, yeah. Which I thought that was kind of interesting. But when I was reading it, I went back and I was trying to figure out when did they first say Voldemort and when did the Death Eater show up. And it was after they first said it, they showed up in the square. So it's more of like a GPS. Like you can narrow down an area, but you can't say a specific spot. Apparently, if you're in a unplottable location or just something with those enchantments.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Sirius's father who put the unplottable as well as a number of other defensive enchantments over Grimmauld Place. They seem, to this point, still be holding generally, so that even if someone says the taboo word, you can't just walk into Grimmauld Place. I find that incredibly powerful. That's amazing that charm still holds. You'd think the taboo would be like a little bit more specifically located and maybe break an enchantment like that, but
it's almost like I mean, if it's unplottable, I guess the best they can do is that they know it's in the area. I did think it was interesting that even though they were in the house and it had all of those enchantments, that it still went off.
That's true too. It's not some completely protective bubble.
Right. I was more intrigued by that.
It's a semi-permeable bubble.
Yes.
So, we do have a couple of other things that we want to talk about before we wrap up this episode, and most of it is Jen's reactions to the end of Half-Blood Prince, which is her favorite book. And she has been on since the start of Deathly Hallows, so some of her thoughts on the beginning chapters from Deathly Hallows, which were pretty awesome, I think. As a start to a book through the first 10 chapters now, it's a rock solid 10 chapters. So, what are your thoughts?
That's a good question. So, the end of Half-Blood Prince, I always just think is really well done. I think it has a really good sense of helplessness running throughout it. Obviously, with Harry not being able to fight back, that's a large part of it. But it is just interesting to see all of those events kind of unfold. And then being able to finally put together all of what Malfoy's been doing and listening to him. And I think it is a very telling moment that he hesitates as much as he does for killing Dumbledore, especially when Dumbledore says, "We can protect you," because I always got the impression from Malfoy in that moment that he is considering it. If Dumbledore said he could make his family safe, that he'd go over in a heartbeat, but I think he's just maybe a little bit too, maybe very aware of how difficult that would be and also just not able to trust Dumbledore. I think that ends up really working against him. I think he just he seems like someone who would just have a hard time trusting anybody.
He's in a really, really hard spot. It's the literal definition of like a rock in a hard place.
Yeah.
Where you don't win. Either way you go, you're in really, really big trouble.
Yeah.
And I think Harry, at the end of that book, and throughout the beginning of this book, at least in that scene at the end of the last chapter where he sees Draco torturing Rao, I think Harry's realizing, like, I don't know how much of Draco's heart is in what he's doing. I think he might have doubts, and there's a sentiment of pity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go as far as to say sadness for Draco.
Yeah, I don't think Harry's ever going to feel like outright sadness for Malfoy. I think they have too much of a history.
They're always the antagonists to each other, yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't empathize with him. Yeah, and then, so, that's an action-packed ending, and I think it's really well done. And then it's so gut-wrenching to end with Dumbledore's funeral.
Yep.
That's sad. It's funny because one thing that always stuck out in there is the phoenix crying and then flying off, and then that's it. It was always just kind of, I don't know, rubbing salt into an open wound. A little bit. Like, that always made me cry.
I like how the Phoenix song sounds different.
Yes.
To every individual who hears it. It's their own grief made into song.
Yeah.
I think that's a great line, and I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
Because everybody grieves differently.
Yep.
Everybody has different emotions. Like, even if the general sentiment is, I feel sad, there are different levels.
Yep.
It's a lot of context in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so far for what we've seen with Deathly Hallows, man, there have been some really good chapters so far with this. The Dursleys departing is always an interesting one. The Seven Potters was interesting. It kills me every time that Hedwig gets hit. I was going to post this on the Instagram, and I should have, but this was something else I saw on the Harry Potter subreddit where someone typed up a paragraph where she doesn't die. She just gets hit with a stunning spell.
Okay.
And it's cute. I'll post it on the Instagram. I think of it every time now I read it, where I'm like, I'm just going to pretend that this is the thing that happens. We talked about Rufus. I think we're in kind of a dark place right now. I think one of the things that I like about this book, as much as I agree with Julie's interpretation that it's just Harry Potter and the extended camping trip.
I can't wait to see if that's actually the perception I get when we get to, like, the camping. I know they pulled out the sleeping bags in this chapter, but I am intrigued when we get into the random woods and forests. Mm-hmm. Does it really give the perception like this is a never-ending camping trip?
I think it'll be interesting to see on the reread. I remember, the movie's just...
I think that's got to be our focus while reading this.
Yeah, is this actually...
Is this really the interpretation?
Trip? I think that the book has a bit more action. I think the movies just really felt like a slog.
I think you're right. I think that's what really warps...
Yeah, the perception of it.
The perception of it.
I think that... I do think that there are a handful of chapters in this book that kind of get slower.
Yeah.
And I think that also plays into it, because then you remember from the movie the camping and you're just like, it never ends. But... I don't think it's that bad. I know there are some really good chapters coming up. Once we get to the Tale of the Three Brothers, that whole 5-minute story that they do in the movie is some of the best.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's no notes. It's wonderful. And I really like the end of this book. I'm excited to get there. I just think they're doing, right now we're in such a good place of uncertainty. They are lost. They don't know what they're doing. They have this locket that they're going off of. Harry's got a bunch of answers. That's not much to go on relative to the other books.
It's interesting to see them struggle with the lack of answers.
Mm-hmm.
And how Harry puts it on Albus, which is fair.
Yeah.
But then Ron and Hermione doesn't try to do it because she's aware. But they both do, from time to time, put that on Harry. Mm-hmm. Like it's Harry's fault. They almost never seem to put it on Dumbledore. Like when we get to those parts, we can really dissect it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like where blame is placed.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to kind of figure that out. Jen, here's a question from one of the earlier chapters that I have been very excited to discuss and break down with you, because it's been kind of our thing on the podcast.
Okay.
And when Harry was thinking of seeing Gregorovitch in one of his visions,
mm-hmm.
Ron asked him if he was really seeing Dragomir Gorgovitch,
okay,
who was a chaser that was recently signed with the Chudley Cannons and has the record for most dropped quaffles. And Molly and I started to get into the details of Quidditch ownership and how could a Quidditch general manager make such a poor move of giving a record fee to someone who also has so many dropped quaffles in a season.
Mm-hmm.
And I really am looking forward to your Quidditch expertise and analysis on how could you give a record fee to someone with most dropped quaffles.
Okay, so the only thing that we know about him is that he has a record for the most quaffle drops.
Yes.
Okay. So that's not enough to be able to tell what. So he drops the most quaffles, but what is his ratio of, like, does he just get the quaffle substantially more than any of the other players on his previous team? Because if you look at it in absolute numbers, then he may have the most quaffle drops, but if he's also scoring the most, what's his ratio? What's his ratio of successful passes to quaffle drops?
I love that sentence. Okay, so there's also, so scoring to quaffle drops. Are assists a thing? Like him assisting on a score?
What are his offensive metrics in a positive light? And how does that contrast against quaffle drops? And then what is that ratio? How does that relate to other equivalent chasers across other teams? Because this is only, you can't make these kinds of decisions on absolute metrics. You have to look at ratios.
I guess we're basing our surprise, given Ron and his aggressive take on just how poor a decision it was to give a record fee. Maybe if it wasn't a record fee, maybe that's the part that Ron's quibbling on.
Okay, so then the other things that you could consider is if this is something to be truly upset about, that he does have the most quaffle drops, and it's not something where it's like a skewed absolute number relative to like a ratio. It could also be that whatever Quidditch teams these are feel like they've noticed a flaw in his quaffle holding mechanic, and they're confident that if they fix that, he will be able to produce at a very high level.
I like it. A possible form issue that they can correct.
Yes.
Make him better.
Yes.
I like it. This is why I go to you for our Quidditch quaffle analysis.
Thank you.
You did not disappoint.
Thank you.
On that note, we will wrap it up here for Chapter 10, Kreacher's Tale. Thank you all for listening. Like I said, give us all that feedback. Comment on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, all of the good things. We will shout you out on the podcast. Participate in those polls. Give us a 5-star review. That helps too. Also, just share the podcast with people. Makes a big difference. With that, we will wrap it up here. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.